press a button that says "Go Live" on the YouTube screen thing. There it goes. And now we need to check to see if it's actually. It should be going. It says it should be showing. Blah, 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 going live. We're going live.
Fuck it, doing live.
All right, we should be good now. I'm gonna have to check this out to see if we actually are live, because this thing is it's gonna take me a while to get used to this.
Yeah, it's live. I just got a notification on my phone. But
Excellent.
Anyway, yeah, I miss so much, like, that. If there's one thing I'm gonna miss about cable now that it's dying, it's those secret, like, footage. It's those secret recordings that are taken when somebody taps into the satellite feed. You got Bill O'Reilly doing that rant. You got Pat Robertson saying the guy who called and asked him questions is a homo. Some of the shit which has come out of that is fucking golden, and like I hope that there's at least a new form of it, because
there definitely is. I mean, what's going to end up happening is that you have big YouTubers who don't edit their own videos. They hire people to do it for them, which I'm not criticizing, it's simply pointing it out. What you have is essentially, like, I don't know, 30, maybe an hour of raw footage that gets cut down into frickin' 10 minutes.
Yeah, live streaming. You got like you've even had some incidents where people didn't realize they were streaming. Like Darkside Phil was jacking off and he didn't realize it.
I remember that.
Which is why I become very paranoid about that kind of thing.
I always thought he was kind of a jerk off, but my mind never wandered to that place.
Yeah, I'm too careful about it as is to ever, like, accidentally start streaming before I'm ready. Like, I'm super conscious about that, so nothing like that would probably ever happen.
I have 3 browsers open specifically for this reason. Yeah, if you can see.
So we were going to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have 3 browsers open. Anyone who's looking at the live stream now can probably see my taskbar. I have Brave. I have Microsoft Edge open, though for some reason the icon is invisible, and I have Chrome open. I know I shouldn't have Chrome open, but honestly it's how I do this call, so whatever.
But anyway, so for this episode we got XBL Spartan back on, as you could probably...
Heyo!
Yeah.
And he's got a new mic.
Yeah, and I got a new mic.
No, there's not gonna be a debate today. Actually, something else has happened. It's quite interesting. Suppose we could just let you explain, XBL Spartan.
Me?
Yeah.
No, the other Spartan.
This is... Nah, I'm not doing that. That's so 2006. Anyways, like what me and Filthy Heretic were talking about earlier on Discord?
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I just want to tell you guys that I kind of softened my views a bit, but I still think we should have a state for ceremonial or traditional reasons. But it shouldn't have the same overreaching coercive power it does today. We can all agree on that.
Yeah. And I was talking to you on Discord. I mentioned the Republic of Cospaia, and the system of government, for lack of a better term, that they had was a council of elders who had no actual executive, legislative, or judicial authority. Their edicts were essentially just suggestions that nobody was obligated to follow. They were basically just, it was basically just
it was
advisement.
A purely advisory kind of body that people just respected them because they were their elders. It was part of their tradition.
Yeah, it's not really a state then at that point, is how I would look at it, because there is no...
Well, Casapia had borders, though, so technically was still a state.
Well, they weren't enforced by any sort of monopolistic entity in that region. The borders were for Italy and the Papal State underneath it.
What moment?
Did not have...
One moment, please. Sorry to interrupt, but we got a super chat from UFO Talk for $2. He says, Ghost from True Capitalist Radio sends his regards.
Oh yeah, he's live right now too.
Oh, right, he is.
That freaking guy.
Did he actually mention us?
He's mentioned us a couple of times because we keep fucking with him.
Well,
I'm okay with this.
I keep spamming his chat, asking him to debate me. And of course he won't because he's a spineless coward and a liar. He said he'll debate anyone. In his words, he'll make anyone who debate him lower than a leprechaun's nutsack. So when I offered to debate him, he freaking buckles down and takes it up the ass.
You actually called him up and tried to debate him, and he hung up on you after like 5 seconds. It was hilarious.
He said he would give me 2 minutes to explain my position, and he hung up on me after 10 seconds.
It wasn't even 10 seconds. It was, you said, well, you're saying I have to justify my position, but it's actually you who has to justify, and then he hung up on you right there.
Yeah. And now whenever he mentions it, he always tries to misrepresent me. Oh, I don't have to explain anything. You had to explain something. That's how he says I said it, which obviously is not true, but let's be honest, the guy knows absolutely nothing about, well, anything, let alone individualist anarchism.
He's probably a actor.
I'm gonna be completely honest, I really don't think so. Now, granted, I'm a
Really?
terrible judge of character, but in all honesty, people who are actors will typically show some semblance of brilliance or intelligence that would indicate that they know more than they let on. People who are playing stupid tend to occasionally show themselves to be these glimpses of genius, and the guy is just one, a broken record, and two, an absolute idiot who might.
There's no hint of irony at all. I think that's what you're going for. But yeah, the other thing is Ghost has been like completely consistent for 11 straight years. So if he is an actor, that is a long fucking time to stay in character.
Yeah, XBL, you should start watching his show because it is like a 4-hour spectacle of autistic rage.
So his channel name is just Ghost?
No,
Ghost
it's
Politics.
No, I don't know. Never mind.
His channel name is Ghost Politics.
Like Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
yeah.
Wrong Ghost.
Yes, like that.
Okay.
Except
He calls
it's
himself Ghost too. It's great.
it's all one word. So just Ghost Politics.
Just Ghost? Okay.
Ghost
Ghost of Politics?
Yeah.
But yeah, I was going to. Somebody actually mentioned something that was intended to piss Ghost off. But yeah, Ghost is taking the conventional mainstream media narrative on this, which I for the record, what we're talking about. We mentioned this like 2 streams ago, that the United States is attempting to is attempting to go to Golan Heights, Syria. And well,
You mean Golan Heights, Israel?
No, we
yeah,
don't.
it's Israeli occupied now, but it was part of Syria. And well, something that somebody who donated to him pointed out is, are you guys familiar with a company called Genie Energy?
You posted that
Never
on
heard of
the chat, but
Genie Energy.
Well, it's a oil and gas company, which particularly is focused on the Gulf states. Right now, it has a oil project in Golan Heights, but basically they did an expedition and they found Genie Oil found a large amount of oil and gas in Golan Heights, specifically the region just south of Katrin, and so they wanted to drill there, but according to the UN, since Golan Heights was a Syrian territory, that would have violated the UN's international laws. So yeah, so the US annexing, well, not annexing from Syria, but recognizing it as an Israeli territory and Israel occupying it would allow Genie Energy to start drilling for oil in the region, and Israel just so happens to be a company, not a company, well,
A
kind of
country.
a company, but a country which is no, which is sympathetic to the U.S. in terms of trade policy, while Israel is not. Israel is strongly allied with Russia and China,
Wait a minute,
and
you mean
are
Syria? Syria is allied with China.
yeah. I said Syria. There's and are OPEC skeptical. So
Well, normally this should, if we had actual, even just libertarianism, this kind of thing should not be up to international bodies or even Syria or what are they called, Israel. It should be a question of who owns the property, like who is the legitimate owner of that property, and then Genie Energy making either buying up the land themselves or forming some kind of contract to allow them to drill in the land. The fact that you have an entire political organization dedicated, an entire political agenda dedicated entirely to annexing part of the region just so one private company can drill for a deposit that may or may not be there, it's strikes me as very silly, honestly.
and if
They
you
didn't-
if you
They're
look
not
at
annexing anything. Golan Heights are already part of Israel.
it
So-
wasn't. It was part
Up
of
to Israel to just decide if the oil of the company can drill or not. They're not invading anything.
It was part of Syria though. But anyway, the Strategic Advisory Board of Genie Energy. This company is fucking disgusting. If you look at the people that are advising the actual policy of this company, it's fucking it's revealing. Well, first of all, right off the bat, you've got Dick Cheney. I'm not even joking. Dick Cheney, as in the former Vice President Dick Cheney. Rupert Murdoch, as in the chairman of News Corp. James Woolsey, the former CIA director. Larry Summers, former head of U.S. Treasury. Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico and ex-ambassador of the United Nations.
I'd like to see some sources here because
I linked the source in the Cool Capitalist Kids chat.
You'll have to link it to him directly because he's not in the KKK chat.
Michael Steinhardt and Jacob and
just link it to me in Discord, okay? Thank you.
and Jacob Rothschild are all on the advisory board of Genie Energy.
This is definitely a government shell company, or at least a CIA shell company. It's some government shell company.
I don't have.
I linked it in the chat for the call.
Okay.
Yeah, it just popped in.
And
But-
yeah, this is publicly available information, by the way. This isn't like there isn't like no citation or sketchy sources. No, I mean like you Google Genie Energy. What I just told you is going to be some of the first things that come up. So this is completely uncontroversial information.
Okay, I don't see any scandals on the Wikipedia page, so
It
where are
don't
you
think
getting
it'll-
this information?
I don't think it's good. You want to look up the board of directors.
Yeah, it's right. It's listed right there on just their general page.
Okay, so former politicians going on the board of directors somehow makes the company tied to the government somehow?
Well, it's not just former government employees, because you could have a staffer for a senator there, maybe a congresswoman there. It could be like a random assortment of politicians, but no, these are major players. So
Yeah,
this is
Jacob Rothschild is yeah, he's not necessarily a government official, but I mean the Rothschilds it manipulates basically the entire most of the central banks in the Western nations through the Trilateral Commission, IMF, and several different organizations like that.
This might be a layer that he hasn't quite reached yet.
Oh, okay, but yeah, on top of that, Genie energy is tied to IDT and Epic, which are other energy companies, but those are all heavily subsidized by the state. And I haven't really looked into Genie Energy, whether or not it's directly funded. But, you know, given that Dick Cheney is on the fucking advisory board, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that it is. If I'm wrong, then I'm willing to accept that. But yeah, Jacob Rothschild, fucking Dick Cheney. This is almost definitely a government front here.
Let's try this. Spartan, what do you know about the Rothschilds?
Well, the Rothschilds are one of the richest families in the United States, and they earn that wealth fair and square. Thank you very much.
What do they exactly do? Because I honestly don't know.
They're a banking dynasty.
A banking conglomerate, I think.
They're bankers, alright.
Yeah.
Pretty much, and it's worth noting that the Rothschilds, historically, for literally hundreds of years, have been involved in funding just about every major Western political revolution, including the American Revolution, and I believe that they were involved in the communist revolutions in the West, or not in the West, in China, and what was it called in the Soviet Union, in that transition of Russia to the Soviet Union?
They funded the Bolshevik Revolution. They funded the Chinese Communist Revolution. They funded the Nazi Party of Germany. They fund basically any group which has went to war. The Rothschilds directly influenced that decision.
Interesting.
So you say
again, I'm going to have to see another citation for this.
And well, that's just it. I mean, there's a lot of information to go through. I mean, we've done videos on it, and I could I'll send you a citation after the stream, because yeah, we're just talking as of right now. But yeah, there's so much stuff the Rothschilds have been involved in. It's not necessarily just funding political revolutions and you know, creating these central banks and manipulating international fiat currencies. It's just the stuff that they are involved in. It is very. Firstly, it's incredibly coercive, and it's almost entirely dependent on government bodies being there to either subsidize or create conditions where this behavior can be acceptable, and these people wouldn't be either bankrupt or, you know, paying fines to people they victimized. But yeah, the Rothschilds, I think one of the last things I'd say about them is that they earned their money fairly.
Pretty much. Now let's move on to a slightly, I don't know if I want to say less controversial topic, but one that I still think is incredibly strange, and that is we have, let's see if I can find it again. We have one county in New York State declaring a state of emergency. Now, of course, we have massive flooding in the Midwest and a bit of the Northeast, so you think in terms of a state of emergency, that's what will be going on, right? Well, no. The state of emergency is about vaccinations. Apparently, they've decided to ban all unvaccinated kids from going into any public spaces. Now, this includes hospitals, this includes schools, and that includes storefronts as well. It's, for some reason, there is such an epidemic of people who are not being vaccinated that the government thinks it's justified in preventing them from entering public squares or entering into public areas.
Even though there have only been 4 reported cases of measles in the entire Northeast.
Even though there have only been 4 cases. Yeah, it's Rockland County, New York.
That's yeah, that's a thing.
And this is something I've been noticing quite a bit, both in the last few months, but it seems to be ramping up now. Maybe it's only because I'm just noticing, or it's because I've been getting some recommended videos about like commentators mocking anti-vaxxers. But I think that there's something very strange going on in this regard, that there's a lot of propaganda out there about how bad anti-vaxxers are, and the whole point appears to be mockery.
And I'm not really, I'm not really taking a side because, frankly, I haven't done a whole lot of research into the specific scientific arguments behind it. But I have, I've listened to both sides, and I can say that just based on how the quote unquote pro-vax, so the people who think that people should be forced to vaccinate themselves or their kids, based on how they're acting, that's giving me some very serious red flags. Now, I'm not going to go out on and say just yet that the science behind what they're arguing is false, but the fact that there's so much propaganda being put into forcing something onto people against their will, that has leads me to think that something's going on with the vaccines.
Yeah.
And it leads me to think that... Oh, sorry, you were saying something?
Because
what's wrong with making sure people are vaccinated? That's just a matter of public health.
I don't think it's
you don't want an outbreak of measles in elementary school, people.
There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with vaccinations. There's nothing wrong with vaccinations, in my opinion. It's just that every time the government makes something compulsory, it's never going to be about what they're claiming that it is. There's always a purpose to it. And it's generally...
I think you're blasting this way out of proportion, and it's probably in some deep South Hicksville area, Bible Belt, somewhere over there, but probably that wouldn't happen in any major city.
I don't think it's so much that. If you give somebody the authority to just force something on other people, like a vaccination, you could have any number of... well, you're basically making them a monopoly on it, for one thing. And for another, you're allowing them to just force any substance into other people's bodies.
I mean,
so I don't think that
Which is why when something is compulsory, it's almost always... Well, not even almost always. It just straight up is always going to be... There's something sinister about it. Because if it wasn't compulsory, then people would be doing it voluntarily if it's in their own interest. People don't want measles. People don't want diseases.
People don't want the flu. And as a result, you have pharmacies that do voluntary flu injections. You're not required to by the government.
That's one of the main points.
And guess what? Those flu vaccines are absolutely free of charge, too.
Well, that's one of the main points of contention, though, with how the media and how the politicians are presenting it, is pro-vax versus anti-vax. It's that classic false dichotomy trying to entrench people in tribalism, but that's not at all a fair characterization of either sides. As I mentioned, since the quote-unquote pro-vax side, what they really want is to make vaccinations by the government compulsory, so you're forced to have one against your will. Really, they should be considering themselves compulsory, the compulsory position, and most of the time, the people who are quote unquote anti-vax are not even saying vaccines are bad. From what I've heard, at least, I think I'm almost positive that you're going to find some out there who are like, yeah, no, all vaccines are terrible. The concept of vaccines are bad, but the term anti-vax implies that, yeah, they don't think anyone should be vaccinated, period, which of course is a straw man argument. Most of the people are simply pointing to ingredients in the vaccines which are questionable, and questioning why it would be compulsory if it is in our interests in the first place.
I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to, does the government have the right to force you to have something injected into your body? They'll come up with any excuses they want, that it's for your own good, that it's for public health. They'll make any justification that they have to get whatever substance they want injected into your own body.
Well, if it comes to someone having some sort of psychotic breakdown, then yeah, they do need to be medicated with something.
If it's really necessary, then compulsion shouldn't be necessary, since it's already in their best interest and they'll get it voluntarily. You don't need the government to force people to do things that are in their own interests.
Why would they get that voluntarily if they're, seriously mentally ill? They don't know what's going on around them. They need to be institutionalized and medicated for their own good in those extreme cases. That
does bring up an interesting topic, because I haven't really thought about much, because I actually have a sister who's been in and out of the mental hospitals because of major depressive disorder. This is the same person that tried to fucking rob my mother. Remember that story 6 months ago?
Oh yeah.
Well, you weren't here, Spartan. But yeah, so I'm like, you know what? That would be an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah,
so,
it would.
Let's talk about
I think we're getting somewhere with this.
All right. So, question is, if someone is not mentally competent to do what's in their best interests, then that means that someone who would most likely be family would be able to make that decision on their behalf. Like, say you have someone who's absolutely psychotic. But would it be coercion
but would that be coercive if it's against that person's will, though? And would that violate the non-aggression principle?
If that person is actually incapable, then that means that they don't. They can be demonstrated not to have the agency to be able to make that decision for themselves. Yeah. If they don't have the ability to demonstrate their
self-ownership,
their agency in that way, then it means that they don't necessarily have the ability to demonstrate self-ownership. So somebody having a parent in that case or a family member make decisions for them is not coercion.
Obviously, I think a good example that a lot of people can relate to is Alzheimer's. They have a parent or a grandparent who, they're too far gone to be able to make these kind of decisions for themselves, and they have to have family members help them along. They need nursing. They need full-time help. Mostly because they're late to a meeting with President Truman, but that aside, yeah, it's a very unfortunate position.
I just thought about that. That's sort of if they're unable to express agency.
And yeah, in those extreme cases, what's wrong with, let's say, a government getting involved in providing treatment for free?
Because it's a monopoly that can declare itself allowed to.
I just thought of something. I was going to say that if they're unable to express agency, then that would basically mean do whatever the fuck you want. But I know
it just means it means they wouldn't be able to consent to something. They still, you can't you can't rightfully demonstrate the ability to, beat the crap out of somebody who's mentally ill. That's not.
No.
Yeah.
And
okay.
If they're,
I was like,
and that's a very important aspect of transhumanism.
Like I said, this does fall into, if it's for the public good, then sometimes you do need to take drastic measures.
There's no such thing as there's no such thing as social utility, and again, these aren't drastic measures. This is just what's demonstrably right. We're not saying, this person has the ability to consent or people can't consent for him, but in this case, he should be forced into it. No, the reason that he's even a ward of his family in the first place is because he's incapable of demonstrating that he would be able to consent to anything. So it's like someone who's in a coma, for example. You wouldn't say that they're no longer human because they're in a coma.
Or like that hot chick at the bar gets super drunk and wants to have sex with you. Is that true consent when she's, you know, intoxicated like that?
Technically, it still is. Like, that's like saying if a drunk driver crashes into you, it's like, it wasn't.
Well, no, not medically. If they're not capable of demonstrating, if they're not capable of demonstrating the ability to consent, then they can't rightfully be considered self-owning agents for that specific area at the time. And that's a big problem that I've noticed with libertarianism, at least in how it's been classically seen, and why I think transhumanist ethics are so important, because it really is sort of, even with the best philosophers, it's agency is presented like it's just sort of a static, never changing thing. Yeah, everybody has agency, of course. But that's because they're you know, they have a frontal cortex which is developed to the point where they're able to do so. I would have to look at the specific regions of the brain. I'm not super familiar with neurobiology, but with neurology. But yeah, my point is that yeah, in a situation like that, well, date rape, I think nobody would say that date rape's a good thing. Date rape is definitely coercive, but but yeah, it's coercive because in the state of mind where where someone who was slipped date rape drugs, you know, that person is not capable in that state of consenting. They're biologically incapable of doing so in that state of being drugged. So one of the things that people, I think, need to take into consideration is that agency can be affected by external states or biological abnormalities, such as disfigurement, which causes mental disability, or neurological disorders. And I think that's a pretty uncontroversial position. It's just not very commonly articulated. And yes, you could very easily objectively demonstrate the difference between someone who is mentally ill in this situation and someone who's competent. Simply, okay, well, were they capable of consenting? Were they capable of understanding what they were reading? Were they capable of actually being able to say that they consent, or write a document which says that they consent?
Yeah.
And again, there's a bit of a false dichotomy, a simulacrum, so to speak, there, where yeah, if there's variation, then somehow it's not agency or self-ownership. That doesn't make any fucking sense, though. Like, if there is a bit of complication there, and it actually, okay, if there is actually, you know, room for discussion or any sort of I'm struggling for the word, but if people come to a not fucking hell, I can't think of it right now, but
decision.
Yeah, if it's capable if you're capable of, I fucking can't think right now. I'm sorry.
All
I don't
right.
know why the fuck I can't, but
Well, can I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think all of us here are not anti-vaccine. We understand that vaccines are useful both in terms of preventing diseases and as well as curing them. It's just that we're
Yes.
highly skeptical of giving a coercive monopoly the authority to inject substances into our body against our will. Whether it's for our own good or not is completely irrelevant. The fact is that if you give them the power to inject a vaccine into us, it's the same thing as them being able to inject cyanide into us, at least on principle.
And that's just the point. If you give it a coercive monopoly having direct influence over your life, that's by default not going to be justified, and it's not going to be in your interests. So
it might be in your interest now. I mean, that could happen, but will it be in your interest later? That's something you fundamentally have no control over, and it's a incredibly dangerous thing to give them. Any power you give the government now is power that will be used against you in the future. That's not even a maybe, it's a certainty.
I was going to say, Riley.
Well, I can't see if any possible way medicine can be used for evil.
Well, I mean, it has. The existence of poison is proof of that.
Hey, what was the origin of just drink the Kool-Aid? Wasn't it because like some dude fucking like?
And I don't think the opioid crisis we're experiencing right now has anything to do with the government. It's just people being responsible.
I've done a video about that. The government has directly created the opioid crisis.
Of course, the government has directly caused every major social ill that has ever possibly existed. It can never be the result of individual human agency.
Look up
give me a break.
We can...
Yeah, look up MK Naomi. It's pretty much on record that the drug crisis was manufactured by the CIA in the 1970s.
Nothing we're saying is incorrect or even.
I think we're trying to say.
I mean, I've shown in my video using government.
I never heard of that MK, but I've heard of MK Ultra, but that's for others.
MK Naomi is a different project entirely, but yeah, basically, MK Naomi is proof of two things. One, that the government manufactured the drug crisis and it created AIDS. And MK Naomi. Yeah.
Wait, they created AIDS. What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The project MK Naomi was first set up to basically in order to try and combat the anti-war movement which was going on in the 1970s, and so that's. Yeah, they were experimenting with hardcore hallucinogens, and the CIA was selling it to them in order to get more revenue for their their military budget, like their off the record budget, but also their expenditures. That's the term I was looking for. But also it was to try and break up the anti-war movement, and it's on record. You can look this up. There's mention of a disease which was manufactured, I think by I don't remember. It wasn't the CIA. It was another agency working with the CIA, but they created the HIV virus. And they were testing it on monkeys, and one of the monkeys got loose. So
that sounds something like out of a fucking comic.
But how a monkey could transmit AIDS to a human is, I don't even want to think about it.
Keep in mind, AIDS is not just transmitted sexually; it's also transmitted through body fluids. If the monkey bit someone, the saliva could get into the wound.
Also, babies, they're like gums. They're just like holes in them, like where the teeth are. They suck on the titty milk. Yeah, they can get AIDS.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
no.
I know about that.
Okay. This weird AIDS infected monkey.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, it's not controversial that AIDS originally came from monkeys. This is actually pretty well established. It's just that it was
I did not know
previously not known where AIDS itself and how it got into monkeys in the first place. Of course, monkeys have incredibly similar anatomies to humans, so naturally, anything that can infect them is probably going to be able to affect humans. Probably. It's going to depend on the breed, obviously.
that. Wait, so are blacks actually dying of AIDS instead of crime like the government tells us?
Probably both.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's
that's fucking.
pretty
Yeah,
scary
that's-
what's actually happening. But you do laugh about how much of human society or how much of society's ills can we blame on the government, and how we seem to always have the same answer to every single problem. The trouble is, like, it's hard to find problems that aren't caused by the government. Like, unironically, I have genuine trouble finding them.
Same.
I mean, in video
Yeah.
games, I mean, we have the problem of copyright laws and the fact that EA subsidized 40 million by Florida.
Yeah, there really isn't a single thing which is at the very least indirectly caused by maybe not the CIA, but one of the international bodies like the IMF or World Bank. I mean, seriously, pretty much everything which is wrong in our society today, even our social behaviors. Like, if you want to get down to things which not even everyone sees as a problem, like Chad's and Stacy's sort of quote unquote degenerate entitlement and undesirable social traits which have come out of the recent decades. Well, if you look at, the government, there have been increasing social programs which are going to manipulate our social environment through a documented phenomenon which occurs in neuroscience known as neuroplasticity, where humans begin to shape around their environment. So there's a serious case to be made that the way people behave right now is influenced by the government.
Even like a textbook I remember reading like in my health class of like high school, and it was listing examples of like, no, it wasn't health class, it was government class, and it was listing like all the things you would do in a day, but like those simple things, like something as simple as eating like cereal, there's like government involved in some way, such as mandating nutrient facts.
Oh, and Filthy, I got done watching that Anarcho-capitalist Ancient Ireland video, and sorry, but Ancient Ireland was not a true libertarian society. They owned slaves. And wherever there's slavery, there's coercion involved, and thus it cannot be a true libertarian society. I'm sorry, but people,
that as an
you
example
guys should
of,
stop.
I was citing that as an example of libertarian court systems.
You're gonna have to give me a citation.
But Ancient Ireland was not a libertarian society, and so you should stop using it as an example.
You're gonna have to give me a citation on there being slaves there, because I've never seen that even according to historians.
Everyone had slaves back then. Hello.
Well,
that's not a citation. I mean,
well,
did they
no,
have
that's just a historical fact that around that era, slavery was just widespread around Europe, including Ireland.
It was
people
widespread,
also were able.
I haven't seen any proof of. I haven't seen any historical examples of that or citations. So this is new information to me as well.
Okay, now you're denying the fact that slavery inexplicably didn't exist in ancient Ireland, even though it existed everywhere else in Europe.
Here's the thing:
at that time,
you might be right. I don't know. I haven't seen the evidence myself. So
well,
this is
also the fact that
this is new information to me too.
Yeah, I didn't say it's not there. I said I'm going to need to see some citations on it, because I've looked through both mainstream historians, the ones with the more unconventional views, free Han law, and I've never seen anything about slavery. And I mean, if your main case is, well, every government in Europe had slaves, when I mean the initial claim is that Ireland didn't even have a government. I mean, if that's your only case for how that was, I mean,
well, the video I watched made mention
I'm
of
still open to look at for the
doo-wops being open to all
but, yeah,
free.
I'm significantly unconvinced if that's your only argument.
And for there to be a distinction of free men, there must also be, unfree men existing in ancient Ireland.
People also used to sell themselves into slavery to pay off their
I
debt.
was just about to make that point.
That's voluntary slavery, though.
I know, you're
That's
right
not-
ahead of the point. Like, I was about to make the point of like,
Voluntary.
what if someone
slavery-
voluntarily sells themselves into slavery? Is that
That's not
consensual?
slavery.
It's just
It's voluntary, so it's
Voluntary.
not.
Oh my God!
That's
You're
masochism.
defending indentured servitude.
Hear me out here. Slavery is defined as involuntary labor. And if you're selling yourself into indentured servitude for a period of time for the purposes of payment for one thing or another, that by definition cannot be slavery.
It's forced labor, though.
It's not
No, it's
forced.
not.
You're their
Voluntary.
property.
If you're volunteering yourself, how is it forced?
Oh my God!
Not only that, but who are you to say that they're
Are
not
you
allowed to
hearing
do
this?
what they're...
People watching this, they're defending slavery right now.
Now hold on, Spartan. Who are you to
Habitat
tell
for-
them that
Habitat
they're
for
not allowed to
Humanity,
sell
guys.
themselves?
Guys, wait a minute. Habitat for Humanity, you know that organization? I guess everyone working there is a slave because they're not making anything.
No, volunteer work is different than indentured servitude. That's
That
a
is
red
volunteer
herring, and
work.
you know it.
But it is volunteer work.
Well, let's try this then. What's your definition of slavery?
You're asking my definition?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I'd like for us to define our
When
words.
someone else owns you as property and you have no rights, and they can do whatever they want with you.
Can you define right or rights?
That's how I define slavery.
I asked if you can define rights. Can you do that for me, please?
You
That's
know,
what I'm asking.
human rights, the ability to own property, to vote, to
Self-ownership.
free speech,
Would you say
free
that?
press. Huh?
Self-ownership. Would you say that? That would be the more.
Self-ownership, in a nutshell, yes.
Okay.
Moral autonomy, yes.
So how is that
Hello?
slavery then? Are you familiar with like bar tabs? Would you say that bar tabs are slavery?
What the fuck are bar tabs?
Like
Oh,
when
never mind.
I think Plato goes into very meticulous detail on what distinguishes a free man from a slave back when it was, commonplace. And it's the biggest distinction is the ability to make free decisions for yourself,
Okay.
to have moral agency, to have the duos.
Well, one moment, please. We got a super chat from Captain Pipsqueak. He says, "Freeman was a very common term in the medieval era. Being a freeman simply means you weren't a serf, but
A serf is still a type of slave.
he wasn't
Don't know what a
finished.
serf is.
By that definition, every person alive in Anarchist Island was a freeman."
A serf is not serf is a type of slave, though. I mean, they're tied to the land they work on, and they have their freedom of movement restricted. So you can't see that's a true libertarian society if you have serfs.
Well, we don't
who's
even.
saying you're serfs in Ireland?
I don't even think they had serfdom in Ireland.
Well, of course, this is
I don't know history, so I can't say anything.
I mean, I don't think feudalism was a thing in Ireland.
No, it wasn't. But yeah, you're saying that somebody signing a contract to work and then receive things in return for their work is slavery. I mean, that's I don't see how that's slavery. I also don't see how that's principally any different from like a Marxist argument against the free market.
By that definition, you could actually say that work is slavery. Like all work. If you make a contract with an employer to receive, I don't know, $20 an hour, and in exchange for I don't know, playing bongo drums for 8 hours a day. You could argue that's slavery.
Are you there, Spartan?
Hello?
I can't believe that you would say that being an indentured servant is entirely voluntary when it's usually done out of desperation.
Are you saying that they shouldn't be allowed to have that choice?
I'm saying they don't need. I'm saying they shouldn't be able to be put in that position in the first place.
So they're not allowed to have that choice.
On principle, I agree with you that they shouldn't have to be in that choice to begin with, but typically it's done because it's either because of their material circumstances that are outside of their control, or because of consequences of poor decisions that they have made. But regardless, they are in that situation now, so I see no reason why their ability to dig themselves out of that hole should be restricted, especially since fundamentally the transaction is mutually beneficial and doesn't harm anyone.
Yeah,
or they can have all their debts forgiven in a bankruptcy case.
Yeah, they're still,
like
they're
a normal
still
civil society.
given the ability to climb out of poverty, but they would have to, by making a contract like that. It's just that it's not like they're not making like a wage, or they're not signing a business contract. It's the same thing though. But by limiting that option, you're limiting their ability to get out of poverty. But also, if you were to look at...
I mean, it's in the UN 1948 Declaration of Human Rights that all forms of forced labor, unpaid labor, is a violation of human rights.
It's not forced labor, though.
We don't look to the UN to give us our definitions of morality.
And that includes indentured servitude.
I mean, by the UN's own logic, that means internships are a violation of human rights.
Internships aren't a violation of human rights because internships are an apprenticeship. You're learning under an experienced, plumber or carpenter to become your own skilled craftsman in the future.
But if you're not being paid, which is the definitions that the UN is
no,
using.
No, internships can be paid.
Yes, they can, but they're not always
paid. It's the unpaid internships that really...
so it's voluntary work. You don't necessarily have to be paid for it. And out of this work, you gain wealth in the case of...
Yes, but with internships, you can opt out. When you're an indentured servant or slave, you can't opt out. You can't.
But, yeah, in the case of an apprenticeship, it's the wealth that you would gain is knowledge of that craft and experience and something to put on your resume. So that's okay, but indentured servitude isn't.
Because an indentured servant, they don't have the choice to opt out. They're locked in that contract. They're their property.
Well, they do have the option because they can just simply not sign the contract. They're not being forced to.
I think we're just going around in circles right now. You're just using circular reasoning.
They've answered all of your questions, though.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think that we have a reasonable explanation for all of your concerns. And
so you're saying,
let me finish
if
real
you
quick.
agree...
Let me finish real quick.
Something which, I mean...
Excuse me, I wasn't finished.
Oh, this is getting good.
I mean, don't get me wrong. You do have plenty of legitimate concerns, and of course, there's a very good reason for you to be worried about whether or not people are going to be forced into signing contracts that might not even be in their interest, or otherwise be coerced into it. But the fact of the matter is that on principle, there is nothing ethically wrong with someone signing a contract to exchange one thing, their labor, in exchange for something else, namely the forgiveness of debt, or in the more traditional case, just receiving a wage.
But no one should be in a position where they literally sign their natural human rights away. That just doesn't sit well with me.
Human rights away. But something which I was also going to mention earlier as well is that if you look at like the most common example of a popular a period where indentured servitude was popular, like the late 1600s, early 1700s, when there was actually development occurring in Australia and the colonies, which would become the United States. The governments which those people were coming from, there was simply no wealth mobility whatsoever. You were essentially, if you were a serf, you were forced into that position by the state. There was absolutely no way you would get any loans from the banks to try and start a business unless you went through a guild and got a royal charter to sell something on the market. So essentially, in that position, that was essentially the only way that they would have been able to even try to get a better life for themselves. And so my points in mentioning this is simply that regardless of whether even aside from the fact it is ethical, but it's not even really going to be that common in a stateless society, because in a stateless society there are so many more desirable ways that people can obtain wealth for themselves, and they have a much wider and easier access to it.
I suppose that's true, and given the rise of automation and 3D printing, that makes the need for indentured servitude almost irrelevant in today's era.
Well, the trend that automation is going towards is that eventually everything will be produced so cheaply that you, personally, will become your own means of production.
I mean, McDonald's has already introduced kiosks for instead of waitresses, or not waitresses, fucking cashiers.
So wage laborers are going to be pretty rare as well. Everyone's just going to be able to sell things out of the home and make a decent income for themselves.
I mean, just in August, we've got the means for everyone to become their own gun manufacturer. So who knows where it's going to go in the future. I'm personally excited.
Yeah.
Things you could be able to 3D print. I mean, I know there's going to be food. You could 3D print organs. They can 3D print.
You can already print food with 3D printers. I just wouldn't yet, because for one thing, it's super fucking expensive, and also there's not a whole lot of development with the flavor packets for the prints. So
I bet they taste like ass right now anyway.
Yeah, that would be the only reason you'd want to 3D.
Probably literally tastes like plastic.
Yeah, that'd be the only reason you'd want to 3D print food, though, is if you could create a flavor combination that doesn't exist in nature but is undescribably good, which I'm sure that's going to be a thing, and that's the reason why people will want to do it.
Alright, and super chat from Winks the Biker. The scenario Bob Murphy gave for indentured servitude is if his child had medical treatment that would cost more than he could ever make in his entire life.
Wait, what did you just call him? What was that name?
Bob Murphy.
That name sounds familiar, but I'm pretty bad with names, so...
Well,
yeah.
And yeah, in this situation, we're talking about a stateless free market, so there's never going to be a medicine which is so expensive that you'd never be able to afford it. So,
well, I mean, if everybody becomes their own means of production, you just 3D print the medicine you need. It's super easy.
Yeah, you only get medicine as expensive as it is now because you have patents and you have all these regulations on the medical industry, and you have the government only allowing a few companies to put out product and actually trade on the market. Hell, I know you guys are familiar with this, but XBL Spartan, did you know that it is functionally illegal to create new medicine and sell it on the market? If you create a new...
No, it's perfectly fine to create holistic herbal remedies.
Well, Yeah, according to the patent agency of the U.S. government, you need to go through the FDA if you create a new compound. Like you can't, and according to the FDA, you can't trademark new compounds. And in order to sell it, you need to have a trademark. It's illegal to do so without one. So
Well, it's not illegal to make the medicine, but if you want to sell on the market, well,
yeah, it's not illegal to make it, but if anybody wants it and you want to give it to anybody, that's basically illegal.
Imagine, if you will, you're an amateur chemist and you have a really nasty cough that's been with you since the day you were born. You take this thing that you made and you give it to yourself. It's like all of a sudden the cough is gone forever. So then your buddy, who also has a similar condition, is like, hey, I want some of that. And you're like, sure. You give it to them, and the FDA comes down from the sky just like, nope, you gotta spend $1 billion in testing and over 10 years, then finally get approval from us to be able to sell it in the first place.
You got to spend $1 billion in testing for an agency which isn't going to allow you to do that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But anyways, we've been here for just about an hour, so we should start wrapping this up.
Yeah, I think we should.
All right. So, yeah, thank you, XBL Spartan, for coming on.
You're welcome. I'm glad
you-
to talk with you guys and just... Huh?
Yeah, sorry. How'd you like it? How'd you like being on?
Well, I was quite surprised. I didn't know you'd ever want me back on the stream because I thought you didn't like me.
No, we're hard with some people, sometimes depending on the things they say, but no, I don't despise anybody really on here.
Oh, that's sweet.
There's only one person I could ever say I really despise, and honestly, I haven't seen them in years. I don't even know their name.
I don't despise people for disagreeing with me. I mean, I think some people say really dumb shit, but no, I mean, there are people on here who have done things I'm not really fond of, and yeah, I could say I don't really like them, but it's not because they disagree with me.
Yeah, so I mean.
So, are you saying you're sorry for calling me a fucking hamsburglar?
You gotta admit that's a funny name.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I like you, and I'd still call you that.
Yeah, honestly, I'm pretty sure we'll keep calling you that forever.
I'm not mad with it or anything, but
I wasn't being personal about it, so no, I'm not going to apologize.
I know. You're being facetious.
From now on, I think you have to change your name to Hamsburglar.
Or the 24th chromosome, if that works.
I personally like Hamsburglar better.
Hamsburglar is definitely better.
How did you come up with that in the first place? So I have to know.
He explained.
Please refresh my memory.
It was, I was looking at his avatar and I realized that his hairstyle, I don't know how I made the connection, but the hairstyle of his avatar reminded me of the Hamburglar, so.
The hat, too.
If people in the audience don't recall, the Hamburglar is one of the mascots for McDonald's. But yeah, it's just hilarious. Obviously, we mean that with all due affection.
Right, I know.
Yeah, but anyways, I get it. Thank you for coming on, and if you want, I mean, we can have you back on in the future.
Possibly.
All right then. We'll talk later.
All right.
Well, anyways,
have a good night, everyone.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you for coming on, and we'll see you on Tuesday.